Hello, I'm Steve.
And I'm Tracy.
And we are the Partners at War. Well, this is the second in our series of our Army reviews.
For new players, right? People just starting into tabletop and say, which army should I have? Which one should I buy?
If you did not see our first video, which was on the 8 order armies, then we'll give a little bit of an intro of what we're doing here. We were asked by a lot of people that were new to the game, what army should I choose?
How do I pick?
So we thought we would just do a series of videos telling what we think of each of the armies.
Yes, we are not experts. We are not professional reviewers. But we're going to give you our take on our play and the armies we've played with and how they've worked for us or that we've played against and how they stood up.
We are not going to be covering lore in much detail.
No, we don't really. We didn't make a decision on which armies to play based on lore. And we're not very versed in it.
Lore is not one of the big things that attracts us into the game with individual armies. We like the gameplay. Looks, we'll provide some very quick images of our armies or of some images from Games Workshop site, but you can go online and see the looks all you want to get to get an idea of what's really attractive to you. Because aesthetics does play a part.
Sure it does, absolutely.
But we're going to look at some things such as costs, the ability to paint them for a new person.
Mm-hmm. How fun they are to play.
Absolutely. The ability to travel them.
Yeah.
And then we'll start looking at gameplay, which would be things such as speed, magic, shooting. Are they killy? Are they tanky? Are they flexible on the tabletop? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we will have a somewhat brief discussion on what's the hot topic?
How competitive are they? How well are you going to do if you want to take them to a tournament?
But once again, we're not acting as experts. This is not a preparation for tournament play. Just kind of give a general ranking of, are they upper elite? Are they kind of middle? Or are they right now a challenging place to take to a tournament?
Right.
That's about it that we're looking at. This video, number 2, is going to be on the Chaos armies. We thought this was going to be a short...
Oh yeah, we were going to just lump them all together.
Yeah, we thought they were going to be quick because you got the 4 Chaos Gods, and then we went, oh, and Skaven.
Yep.
And Beast of Chaos. And Slaves to Darkness, and realized there are 7 battletomes for Chaos. So it's actually a larger faction than people think it is. So let's get this started with Khorne. Well, when we started playing 2 years ago, I started playing Khorne kind of at a default. It came in the box set.
Oh,
nobody else wanted to play it.
And everybody else was grab the order armies, and you said, hey, we need a little variety.
We need a bad guy, so I thought I'd play him. The reason I brought that up is so if you sense any from me a little bit of a, it's because I really loved my old build and the flexibility it offered, and some of that's gone away. But that's a part of this game. You're going to get an army, you're going to get a build, rules are going to change, new battletomes are going to come out, and you've got to be adaptable.
Right, and I think that's something that's been kind of a theme throughout. Since we started a few years ago, you have people who would love their armies and then they change. And then you either have to love the new army or you have to get a new army, a completely different battletome.
And there are people who will say that the new Khorne book is better than the old Khorne book, and they find ways to make it. I have not found that yet, so that's where I've kind of moved on. But let's just talk about, for a new player right now coming into Khorne, 1, you cannot find too many just more gorgeous big beasts than you can these bloodthirsters.
That you can actually afford to put in your army.
That you can afford to put in your army. We just played one of our battle reports. We tried the Wrath of the Everchosen book, and Tracy tried Khorne for the first time with 5
of those
bloodthirsters.
I actually usually sit across the table from Khorne. I've played them in several tournaments, played against Steve in a lot of them. So that was the first time I got to play them, and I had a blast.
They're pretty easy to paint, things like the Bloodthirsters and quite a bit of the other stuff in Khorne. So that's a good place to start. If you're going to start in them, I would a little bit worry about the amount of different models that are in the book and how, once again, like Stormcast, they don't always come together. So you need to do a little bit of research of what type of build you want before you just jump in.
Right. There is some cohesion or cohesiveness that you need to plan ahead. Yes. Otherwise, you could waste some money on models. You could waste some money.
We don't want new players to buy a bunch of models that they end up never putting on the tabletop, because this can be an expensive hobby as it is. Right. You don't want to waste your expense on stuff you
or
don't
spend
really
your time painting stuff that never make the table.
Does that happen?
Oh my gosh.
I think we have full painted armies. I got a Mortarion for 40k sitting up there I've never played. So Khorne, painting's pretty easy. If you're going to travel, Bloodthirsters can be tough to move. Those wingspans are huge.
They take up a lot of room. And even in foam, all that pressure on them scares me.
We don't do that. We put them in a large Tupperware type thing that we put metal on the bottom and we magnet and put those in there. Because they can be hard to travel. Even to a local game store, it's a pain in the butt to bring them along. Yeah. Let's talk about some play style things with these.
Okay.
Speed?
I think they're all right.
I think they're all right. They're pretty good. I think you can get board control. You can get around the board. Shooting?
No. I wouldn't say that they are a shooty army.
Oh, I go the exact opposite. They're not a shooty army. You'd be rare to find the shooty.
I used to play against a guy at the game store, and we would go through, okay, here's the hero phase. Shooting, well, that was fun, because there was just never any shooting for him.
Between me playing that and Sylvaneth, I don't get a whole lot of shooting phases. No. So there's where when we went to LVO and I brought the shooty Stormcaster, it was like, this is great, being able to shoot something.
They're actually going to turn.
Magic. Not at all. Khorne is against magic.
Yeah. So we don't talk a lot about lore, but in the lore, that's the big thing, is that Khorne abhors magic.
Absolutely. Unlike the Fire Slayers, that is a major weakness because they can't unbind.
Right.
Khorne can. It does have units that hate magic so much that they're able to unbind.
Right.
So you can sometimes be a very strong anti-magic army, but you're not going to be able to cast spells yourself. Now, you do have prayers, you've got judgments, you've got some other things that you can do during the hero phase, and some of them can be very powerful.
Yeah, quite offensive.
They really can be. So there's some good stuff there. So you'll have some things you can do. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be spellcasters, don't pick Khorne.
Yeah, so shooty and spellcasting, not necessarily their strengths.
It really ends up then with speed and killing you and attacking you. But this is the point where they look so vicious.
They really do. They look like they're going to rip your throat out across the table.
And you do have some rare things. Scarbrand's ability to do 8 mortal wounds, and if you roll a 6, 16 mortal wounds. The Rage Bloodthirster's ability with that axe, if he has a 6, and he hits with a 6 to do that nuclear bomb.
Did I ever roll a 6 when I had my 5 Bloodthirsters?
You didn't.
I played with 2 Rages. And
Not
never
one.
won 6.
Not one. Oh, my happiest moment of any tournament was a guy who had 4 of the ballistas.
Oh, that's right.
2 heroes.
Yeah, I remember
4
that.
of the ballistas and 2 heroes, and I put a rage in there, and I got 3 6s. It was actually with the old book with Gear Strike, so a 5 and 6 hit. But they nerfed that a little bit. But that nuclear bomb went off and took all the ballistas and the 2 heroes, 6 units off the board, 6 blood tithe points. So there are some great epic moments you can have with them. But when you look at some of the other weapons compared to some of the killiness from other armies, I'm still not going to put them as a high elite killy army. Overall, they're a moderate average to maybe above average killy army. Mighty Skull Crushers can be very tanky, but they're still 3/3/1s. You know, 3 to hit, 3 to wound, 1 damage.
Right.
So they're not. They don't just come in and do Witch Elves massive damage or Plague Monks massive damage.
Yeah.
So their killiness is moderate, but you're going to have fun while you do it.
Yes, you are.
Okay, they're going to be fun. Tankiness.
I think that this goes both ways with tankiness, because they do have some units that are really hard to remove from the board.
Mighty Skull Crushers with a bronze flesh on them have a 2+ save.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere.
They'll sit there forever.
Now, the -2, that is just a small unit. So you can still overwhelm them with numbers, so they can sit there all day if they want, but you can still...
3, maybe 6 if you spend a lot, 9, but that's a huge expense in the game.
Yeah.
But Bloodthirsters, they've got 14 wounds. They've got a 4+ save. And because things like they're a monster, they don't get Lookout Sir, you can't get that. So
that's true.
They're targets, and you can see them across the board because they're so big. They get hit all the time, and things will
they're not hiding behind
take
anything.
them out. Things with Ren take them out.
Yeah.
I have had all 4 Bloodthirsters rushing and not got the back-to-back and have them shot off the table, 2 of them shot off the table and another one seriously wounded. And once they get wounded and they start bracketing, they get weaker.
Yeah.
And they get weaker quick. So they're not a very tanky army. This is a risk reward, play for the double turn, and have fun playing them army, which gets into flexibility a little bit. They do have some possibilities with some summoning and some things to be able to provide some flexibility, but they really nerfed a lot of that now that you can't generate blood tithe points as easy as you could in the past, so their flexibility's come down.
I will say that I think they're flexible in that you do have some options during gameplay that other people don't. Because when you have that blood tithe table and you're like, okay, well, I could get another command point, or I could spend it to do this or spend it to do that. You do have some choices to make, which gives you a little bit of flexibility.
I think you know why I have the look on my face right now.
Yes, I know. And I agree. I agree 100% with what you're saying.
GW, why is Khorne the only Chaos Army that if you spend any of your points generated, you empty the account and they all go away?
Yeah.
You can only generate 7 or 8.
During gameplay, for new people, what happens is as soon as you kill a unit, if a unit leaves the table, you get a blood tithe point.
Your team or their team.
Right. So you get these blood tithe. So you get blood tithe points to spend to do cool things. That's where your flexibility comes in.
Some of them allow you to do an unbind right away. Some of them allow some heal. But unlike all the other Chaos armies, if you spend 1 point on this cool one thing and you have 6, you lose the other 5.
Right.
And that's something they could make this army much more competitive, much more much more flexible. If they just change that little rule and allow those to be done. That's enough soapboxing for me. Enough soapboxing.
And it may come to that point. So I wouldn't say that for a new person that should keep them away from the army by any means. What I'm saying is that because of blood tithe points, I do think this army is a little bit of flexibility.
It does. Competitiveness, they're a moderate competitive army.
Yeah, you're not going to see them run a tournament. They're going to be that 2-3-3-2 for the most part.
And I went to a tournament, and I went 1-4. Yeah. And the reason why it's a risk reward. The first 4 games, they were all close, but it came a point in the game where I had to rush the Bloodthirsters forward and hope to get the back-to-back.
Yeah.
You'll be in that position, and in all 4 of those games, I didn't get the back-to-back.
They're not going to hold up against a shooty army. They're really not.
But the last game, I got the back-to-back, and I hit the Rage's number well, and I took all 2,000 points of his off the table, and I didn't even lose a unit.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing you play with this. Local game store stuff, playing around, they're a blast to play with.
They're a cool-looking army. They are going to give you some flexibility, and they are very fun to play. They're not the army for you if your competitiveness outweighs your need to just have fun.
But if you want to just have fun, absolutely great place to start.
I actually recommend them. They're straightforward, easy to play right out of the book. I think they're good.
And it's kind of funny when you go to tournaments and somebody plays Khorne. Everybody's like, "There's just a Khorne." Everybody loves Khorne. And if you go 2-3 or 3-2, nobody looks down on you because they know the strength of the army, but they kind of respect Khorne players.
Right.
That's the way it is.
It is true.
Especially with some of the other Chaos armies being so strong right now. I think that they really respect somebody's playing just a nice army to play.
Right.
It's a good place to start.
I agree.
Nurgle. Moving from the rage god of skulls and blood to the plague god of flies and pestilence and all that nasty stuff, Nurgle.
It's ugly.
It is ugly, but come on.
They do have some really cool models, but I will say it's the one army I refuse to paint. I just can't do it. I can't.
We are going to find that out of the Order armies, you painted the vast majority of the Order armies. Other than Skaventide, I've painted the vast majority of the Chaos armies.
Yeah,
So
it's true.
I'm just going to flat out, Nurgle is fun.
It is a very, very, I don't know, what am I trying to say?
I don't know I don't know what you don't know to try to help you what you don't know.
I don't know.
You wouldn't think that having a bunch of bloated, rotted, I don't know, things, it's almost to the point of comical sometimes to put him on the table and have fun with him. You even say, oh, he's cute, the big, great, unclean one. Oh my gosh, his gut's open and his intestines are flopping out.
But he is a really amazingly
amazing
done model.
I think the cost for Nurgle, just like Khorne, we didn't really talk about it. None of these are extreme either way so far that we've talked about. Dollar costs. So I don't think that should be a factor of you getting involved with the game. Painting, I think these are extremely easy to paint.
Good starter models.
Good starter models.
Absolutely.
Heck of a lot of, all the Blight Kings I've got, the 25 Blight Kings or whatever, they were all done with contrast. They look good. Very simple. These, you'll find these painted exactly the same. Duncan from Warhammer TV does a how to paint. That's exactly step by step, and it's a good place to start on a big model. So they're a good painting model for people to play with.
Again, anytime you get those bumps and those ridges in there, it really just makes it easier on a painter.
Absolutely. Some advice for costs. I'm actually considering doing a separate video that is on how to work with magnets, because I have made it so I can either put all the different weapon options on top of him. For the new players, look out to see how I put magnets on these and really make my money go a lot farther by providing me different options. Because I'm really torn sometimes on which of these builds I want, because it makes a big difference.
Yeah, so you don't want to play with them until they're ready to go, but you don't know what to put on them because you haven't played with them yet.
One of the things new players to the game that get into Nurgle need to understand is that this is an old book.
Little outdated.
More than a little outdated, way outdated, as evidenced by the big card boxes instead of the as evidenced by the big card boxes instead of the small card boxes for the new books. Most of them have been converted over. It's not just the card size, it's a change in the game.
Right.
Khorne has slaughter hosts. And I can pick the Bloodlords or the Gore-Tide. And Tzeentch has all of its covens. And they have all these different ways to build
group, to group your
They call them lodges
together.
for Fire Slayers and their glades for Sylvaneth. None of that exists in the Nurgle book. So if you're going to buy the Nurgle book, I highly recommend you look at getting the Wrath of Everchosen book also, because it provides 4 separate host options for your Nurgle army, which really helps give them some extra abilities and really gives them a pop.
It's just a supplement, a way to give you some variety that the original Battletome doesn't give you.
And I'm hoping that by putting the Wrath of Everchosen out, that's not delaying a Nurgle book coming out, because I think Nurgle really does need a new book.
And I think it may come.
And it may come. But other than that, we'll talk about play style with Nurgle. Speed.
Not necessarily a fast army.
I would say that it is a weakness of theirs that they tend to be slow. A lot of the units have a 4-inch movement. Now, experienced Nurgle players are going to talk about the things they can do with the tree and the bell for the Great Unclean One to get the armies to move. And they're right, but those are buffs and they can help in specific times. But I don't overall think speed's their asset. I do think speed more often than not can become a limitation.
A little bit, yes.
And speed is about board control. And board control is about gaining objectives.
Getting to those objectives and then being able to hold them.
And that's how you win. Remember, new players, it's not about killing the opponent. It's about gaining points through objectives. That's the key to winning in this game. I've seen armies that have been wasted off the tabletop in a fight and still won the game on objectives. Nurgle can have a tough time getting objectives.
I lost a game like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, I almost tabled the person and he still won.
Yes.
Because he held one objective the whole game and it took me forever just to weed through all of his units to get to it.
So when we talk about speed, Nurgle having a limited speed can sometimes stand in the way.
Yeah.
Magic, you wouldn't pick this army for its magic.
No, but it is an army that has some, so it's not like you don't get to participate in the command phase.
And there are some neat spells that come in. I think a lot of them are shorter range and you got to get up on top. So other than, maybe some specific incidents. But other than that, it has magic, but it would not be the reason you would play this army.
No.
I don't think.
Not if that's your, if that's your goal.
Killing.
I have been killed plenty of times by Blight Kings. I honestly have not played against Nurgle a ton, but I will tell you that whenever I line up against the Blight Kings and the Great Unclean One, I'm not a happy girl.
The Blight Kings have exploding sixes that can cause a whole lot of damage. But once again, if you don't roll the sixes, it's not there. And I guess that's the way with everything. But yes, they can be very killy. There's also experience. Once you get some experience, you can find ways to bring in units like from the Slaves to Darkness book that really
give
can
you a
help.
little bit more of that,
You can put a Nurgle keyword on them. They can be in your army, and they can help with your killiness. For new players, that's another book to buy, another thing to look into.
Yeah.
That might be after you've played for a while. So they can be killy. They can also be tanky.
They can be. I can't tell you how many times that Great Unclean One has gone down to 1 wound, and then on the beginning of the next turn, healed up again.
Yes.
And you have to start over.
There's a way you can put him with an artifact that he has a chance of healing all the wounds every round. Epic battle of Great Unclean One versus I was playing Scarbrand in a tournament. 2 turns in a row, Scarbrand hit him full with the 8 mortal wounds and other things, and he stuck around and then killed Scarbrand. So, yes, they can be very tanky. The hesitation you heard me say on both tanky and killy is that in many of the most common builds, you don't end up having a lot of models on the table.
Yes. So although that's nice for travel.
Very nice for travel. If an individual model can be tanky as can be, but you don't have a lot of models, can
you really say your army is tanky?
Can you say your army's tanky? Durable, going to stay on the tabletop, can hold points and just, you can't knock them off. That can be difficult strategy-wise with their tankiness, even though individually, oh my gosh, there's hardly anybody more tanky than Nurgle. They have saves at the end of it to shrug off wounds. You can give them.
Yes.
Not everybody default. It's certain builds you have, but there's things you can do. So they can be tanky. It's just, once again, they're limited by the number of models in many builds.
Flexibility?
One of the reasons why Nurgle needs a new book is it needs to have its summoning points fixed. It is so cool to have plague drones and plague bears and other things sitting off on the tabletop, ready to come in, and then just never really being able to bring them in until often it's way too late in the game because the summoning's so weak.
So I want to bring that point up. Is that when you play a summoning army, when you go to a tournament or you go to your game store, not only do you bring your however many point army, but you also have to pack all the possibilities of things that you could summon as well. So keep that in mind.
My travel with my old Khorne build, where I could summon a lot, was huge. Not only did I have to pack all the Bloodthirsters in there and have all that, I had to bring my regular army, and then I had to bring all the different demons that I could bring in all the different flexible builds. So when you even have to put everything out for your paint, to show people at the tournament and everything you could summon, it was just a huge amount of models because it was so flexible in what I could summon.
Right.
And I could do it on a regular basis. So yeah, that's something for all new players to realize. This has summoning.
It does.
I wouldn't call it a summoning army.
Yes. It's a little limited, so even though it seems like a pro, you don't really get to throw it out there that often.
And other flexible things to be able to do, to be able to move around the tabletop. They've got a guy who can have a unit of him and Blight Kings pop up on the other side of the board, which can be very powerful. But other than that, I think they're a little straightforward. I don't think they're as flexible of an army as I love playing them because they're fun. But they're not as flexible as I personally would like.
No, I would say for a new person, a new player, one of the strengths might be that it is very much a march forward melee, march forward melee, march forward melee. So if you don't know what your play style is yet, it's a great place to start.
And I don't know why rotting pus and fungus and slime and ooze and all that stuff is one of the most interesting lores that I've seen in the game.
It actually is a good story. I have to say, as grossed out as I get from it, the story behind it is really cool.
Without spending too much time on lore, I think because it's so off-the-wall ridiculous who would ever follow Nurgle, makes you want to read it, and when you read it, you go, oh, I kind of see the point that they're making. So it is an interesting nuance to the game. Competitiveness. The flat-out traditional Nurgle build right now is a moderate. I'd say it's very similar to Khorne. I've faced them with Khorne back head to head, and the game could have gone either way based upon priority.
They're very mid-tier, I
Very
think.
mid-tier. Now, experienced players are finding ways to bring in some outside units, label them as Nurgle, especially, as I said, from the Slaves to Darkness book, and really up the game with them. So there's an opportunity for them to be, I would say, above mid-tier, not elite.
Right.
Not elite.
I agree.
But they can be a slightly above mid-tier competitive army.
So, that being said, for a new person, you have room to grow with this army. So, if you really like it, but you're like, I want something a little bit more competitive, there is that opportunity to kind of, after you've mastered what you have, to grow them.
You can expand it and grow it. You're still going to have a cap and a ceiling and a cap.
You are.
You're
Well,
not,
most of us are.
Yeah, they're not going to be an elite army, but they're fun. I would recommend it is a place
I think
for
so.
new
If
people to
you
look.
like this look and you like the lore and you like the models, I think it's a perfectly viable place to start.
I'd be torn between Khorne or Nurgle if I was starting, if I liked a lot of the stuff. I think they're very similar as a good place to start.
Right.
All right. Tzeentch. Tzeentch.
God bless you. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
All right, let's talk about Tzeentch. Probably got a lot to talk about here. This was an army we bought early on because our son George was interested in it. And
We have a lot of armies because George was interested in it.
his attention's been all over the place. I
wonder where he gets that from.
No, I have no clue where he gets that from. No clue. But he also just couldn't find. He got Tzeentch.
He was looking for his home.
And he was just getting slaughtered. And he got the old Fire Slayers. He was getting slaughtered. He was looking for his home. Vince just liked legions, and that's why we haven't mentioned him too much. Stuck with that.
We haven't gotten to death yet, but we'll talk about Vince then.
I'm good. We got it. Painted it. I got the Lord of Change painted a long time ago. Once again, another thank you, Duncan, for just following along and following him almost exactly. And it came out tremendous for new players, new painters. Look online for things that
Yes,
are,
those
and follow
YouTube
them and
offers
take the
so
time.
many good painters who will walk you through step by step on how to paint your models.
Absolutely. There's a lot of help out there. People have been asking us, can we do a painting video? And all we're going to do is say, we're just going to link you to some other ones we watch.
I know. I was
That's
like,
about it.
okay, so first of all, I wear the same exact sweatshirt every time I paint because it's my painting sweatshirt. And so I'm like, I'm not getting on camera with that.
Now, painting wise, it's actually a pretty easy army to paint. I do think so. The colors are great to make it look great.
Okay.
What?
No, go ahead, and then I'm going to jump in on the painting part.
But the colors are great. They pop.
It's a pretty army.
It's a very
It can
pretty
be.
army. It's great colors.
Okay, so my take on I did not do very many of the intricate models or the heroes. What I did was 8 million little models. So I painted probably 100 of these, maybe 120 or 30 of these.
So I did the last 40 of those.
Okay,
recently,
and then I did about 150 of these.
Okay,
little
I believe
brimstones.
that. I believe that.
Oh my gosh, they are not hard to paint, but there's just a lot of them.
Which leads into, if you're going to do the most common Tzeentch build right now, it is an expensive army to get into because of the sheer volume of models you're going to need.
You do. You need a lot of models, whether or not you've read the battletome or not. So if you kill one of these, you get 2 of these. If you kill one of these, you get to replace it with this. So you have to have all 3.
One pink becomes 5 models.
Right, becomes 2 of
Him,
these,
2 blues,
and then
2
2
brims.
brimstones. So
And-
and that's cool. That's super cool. But you have to buy all those models, and then you have to paint all those models.
In summary, for new players, Tzeentch is cool to get into, easy to paint, but it could be expensive.
Yes, you have a lot of models.
There are other builds that you can do that are not the traditional pink horror mass change host summoning version. But that is the most common and the most popular, and it can be a lot of money. And that leads to travel. They're small. You can put a lot of them in things, but you could end up bringing a lot of different models. And once again, you'll have at least Lord of Change as a big that you got to worry about how you're getting them from place to place. But for the most part, in Age of Sigmar, almost every army is going to have something like that.
That's a little more fragile.
That's a little bit more fragile. All right, play style. Speed, well, they can be fast.
They are fast, I think.
When you talk about board control, the most common build with a change host, being able to pop things around the board, I don't think there's anything that has the board control that Tzeentch does right. So I think they're elite with that. Because speed, we're just talking about board control, whether it's speed or popping around the board or whatever. Magic?
Yes, lots of magic. If your playstyle is that you want an army that you are going to get to do a lot of magic, this is a great army for that.
If you love magic, I mean, that's part of Tzeentch, the god of chaos and change and everything else, but magic's thrown into there also. Their hero phase can be a long hero phase. For new players, that honestly can be somewhat overwhelming.
A little bit.
That you might have to have a cheat sheet for you to make you follow everything correctly in the hero phase because it can be overwhelming. They're a magic army. As I said in the first episode, and I still think Lord Croak is the best individual spellcaster right now in the game, army-wise, it's Tzeentch.
Absolutely. In terms of the range and the number of models that can cast and the number of spells that each of them can cast.
Shooting. Limited range, but if you get within range, even the pinks and their shooting buffed up do a lot of damage. It becomes a shockingly shooty army also. It's not Stormcast long strike crossbows or Skaven Tide Jezzails or some other things.
I don't think it could be considered shooty in that most people aren't going to change their playstyle based on the fact that you get so many shots. What I think is that you get the benefit of having a big shooting phase. And you can do some damage, but I don't necessarily, because they don't have the range, I don't think somebody's not going to do something based on the fact that they get so many shots.
But what they can do by being able to jump to that side of the board with a big unit of pinks is to get within range and then force you to move off in an objective.
I think it's more their flexibility. And then on top of that, they get the shots. What happens is they get so many shots that actually do a lot of damage. It's just that the range is short.
You're rolling a whole lot of dice.
Yes. I wouldn't call them a shooty army, but I will say that you will have a big shooting phase.
The shooting buffs the flexibility.
Yes. Okay. I like that better.
Okay. I can see that. Killy? Yes, because of volumes of dice.
Yes.
Absolute volumes of dice. They can be killy. I don't think individually things are doing, he can be if you get within his range with his spells. Nothing can almost be more killy than he is in a hero phase if you get close to him.
Right.
But no, they don't have the Kurnoth hunters coming in and swiping.
I was going to say, there's nothing that I look at when I'm sitting across the table from Tzeentch that I'm like, I have to avoid that unit or that model.
That's because you're playing Flesh Eater Courts and you're equaling them with numbers. I
have played plenty of other armies as well. But I'm just saying, as an opponent to Tzeentch, because I've never actually played them.
We did in our battle report. You played Flesh Eater Courts and I played Tzeentch.
No, I said I've never actually played this army. So I can't say from that perspective, but what I can say is, as an opponent to Tzeentch, there's not one unit that you go, I'm going to avoid that, or I'm going to go after that, because I think they're pretty well spread out. They're well distributed army, because I don't think any one thing is that killing. I
think what you get from that gets to the tankiness aspect also, and that is that if one unit goes away, you have other units that can do the job.
Yes,
it can be very tanky. Pink Horrors are the most tanky unit when it comes to staying on the table in the entire game.
Yeah. So when you start with a unit and then it doubles in size when you kill it, and then even when you kill that part of it, it gets replaced. The longevity. I don't even know if tankiness is the right word in that one. Just the amount of time it's going to take you to wade through that one unit is going to really dictate the game.
And then if in the Battle Shock phase, they get to bring pinks back to start the whole process of the pinks they bring back all over again. And I'm going to bring this up in a little bit when we talk about competitiveness. We'll come back to this whole thing about the tankiness and how it is a factor that I think is impacting tournaments at this point in time.
Right. Yeah.
Flexibility, tremendous. So
lots of flexibility. So we're really kind of only concentrating on one way to play this.
Okay, so now before we go into competitiveness, let's talk, and we are. There are other builds you could do with this, with Carrick Acolytes and Zangors and things like that. You could build this in other ways that if you want to, if you love the looks, they're gorgeous models too.
And they have some really neat models.
Absolutely. But I think every army can have that one build that's the build to take to a tournament, and then all these other different versions.
That one that you're going to see most commonly.
And that's where a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth about this as we get into competitiveness is that this is, I'm going to use a word here that is going to upset some people, but that competitive build with this, I'm not going to say the B word, broke. I'm not going to say that, but I will say it is unbalanced. It is unbalanced with that build right now. I'm saying that early because there hasn't been the year-long of tournaments to see if people have learned how to modify to that play style.
There's not enough data to say that it can't be beaten.
But when it comes to the point of that build, when I saw the preliminary that I made, we painted up all the horrors that I was excited about for its flexibility. If I take that to our local game store and sit across the table, I will have people not show up and play again with me.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we're not playing with that, Steve.
And that's something that new players need to be aware of. If you're going to get into an army that it ends up, nobody wants to play against you, I think that's impacting your fun. And I'm always about that statement, find the fun.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people say, well, they just need to play better and learn how to play against it. Well, then take your Tzeentch and try a Zangor build and a Carrick Acolytes build if you love Tzeentch so much, and try something else. If you're bringing that one build, that change host with tons of horrors, don't be shocked as new players if some people don't want to play against you. And that's something that I think new players need to know.
And I think that is a fair statement. So the whole point of the video is to help people who are new choose an army. So we get into the competitiveness and we talk about it with all of the armies, 3-2, 2-3, those kinds of things. This is an army that in this build is winning tournaments because it has
not winning them all, but I'm telling you, in the hands of a great player, it's immediately rising to near the top, right at the top.
So it definitely has a prejudice.
And outside of even the main tournaments, this is what I'm going to say is a difference. We're going to go into Slaanesh next. The difference between that other very unbalanced army is that this one is so straightforward in its unbalance that even a brand new player bringing this build to a local game store is just going to walk over the vast majority of opponents and make it unfun. Which I'll alter that statement a little bit when we talk about Slaanesh, is that it's a good place for new players to start. But just try other builds than the one big build, because you might make some enemies. Or you're not going to, because you might not make a lot of friends.
That's a better statement.
That's a better statement. I'm upset because I think it's so strong, I won't play it.
And actually we did a battle report, and after we played it, Steve was like, I can't take this to a tournament.
Because in the battle report, I played it against, it was the opening weekend of the tomes. So there were a couple things I did wrong. There's a couple things I did wrong. They've been clarified by the FAQ and some stuff. But I played it against the one army that kind of can go toe-to-toe with it, and that's Flesh Eater Courts with the ability to summon your models back. But you go against all kinds of other armies. I went to the game store, played the guy with his Fire Slayers, and it was the top of turn 2, and he went, I should just pack up. And you could tell he was disheartened. He was a newer player, and I just went, I can't bring them again.
Yeah.
So I'm disappointed sometimes when some certain builds get so unbalanced that I am hoping something's done about that to bring it back up into more of a moderate place, which then for someone like me, opens it up to be more playable once again. So I think it's something new players need to know. But competitive-wise, this is an elite army that actually, all elite armies need a good player to maximize them.
Absolutely.
But this is an elite army that you can play very well with, even as a beginning
right
player.
off the bat.
I hope that doesn't make everybody rush out and buy it.
Well, again, it's gonna hit your pocketbook. So.
Yeah, it is. Big time. All right, that's Tzeentch. Sorry, Tzeentch players. Slaanesh.
Gesundheit.
What? Gesundheit. Find the fun. That's what we say, and we make sure that we do. Let's go through the full list of the cost, painting, everything else before I jump into what I really want to say about Slaanesh. I could say that it doesn't cost that much more than anything else. But when the summoning rules allow you potentially to bring in 4 or 5 extra Keeper of Secrets, and they're $100,
yeah.
$125 or whatever it is dollars a piece, and 4 of them might not even be in your build, that could be an extra $500 you're investing into just to have on the side.
Well, and that is true. That is true. When we'll get into the builds and the models and things like that. But so understanding that Slaanesh is fairly average, but can because you can summon in it
a lot,
and because it has a pretty unbalanced summoning, the models you could bring in are fairly large and expensive. So
that's
keeping that in mind.
Painting. I think it's a pretty straightforward.
I've never painted this. I've never painted any models for this army, so I can't really attest to that.
But I think a lot of other demons, I think it could be very good. I will tell you, one of the most beautiful armies I've ever seen in my life was the LVO winning Slaanesh army.
Yes.
The mods he did to it, the whole imagery of the army, it opens up people to be able to do just whatever they want. And he was taking Marathi and he turned her into a Keeper of Secrets. It was beautiful.
Lots of conversions, but for new people probably. You're not into conversions.
But for new people, painting straight up, I think it's a very, very, very easy army to paint.
Yeah, I don't see anything that would be overly difficult, but...
Travel, once again, you could end up with a lot of big armies and a whole lot of them to take. I think this could be a tough army to travel. That speaks against new players potentially getting into Slaanesh.
Yeah, so the fact that it's a summoning army, which we'll get into playstyle with that, means that you're going to have to tote a lot of extra
and you're summoning
models.
Big things, potentially.
Yes.
Not summoning a whole bunch of small things that you might in some of the other stuff. Gameplay, we've not played them.
We played against them.
But even then, very limited.
Not as much as you would think.
Because usually to play against them, you have to be at the top tables right away. And if you lose one of your first 2 or 3 games, then you're not. So if you don't get them in an early draw, so just not really run across them. A lot of that's chance in big tournaments, having gotten them in the first 1 or 2 tables, or the second round if you win. We don't have a whole lot, but we've watched some games. We've sat and watched. So don't know how accurate we all are on all of this. But speed, just in watching them, there's a lot of speed. They can get around the board.
Yeah.
There's ways they can get around the board. So they have a lot of opportunities for board control. Magic, this is a lot of perception. Very strong magic also.
It seems like they do have a lot of magic.
Shooting, I can tell you right now, I have no clue. I have no idea about their shooting. So I really can't advise new players about that. Can you?
No, I honestly don't have enough experience.
Killing?
They're very killy.
Yes. Tanky, when you put in summoning in with tanky, I don't know of anybody else in that big picture that could be more tanky than them.
Right.
Tzeentch and them both have their different ways of they're going to be on the tabletop. You're not going to turn them off the tabletop. So that checks that box. Flexibility, because you can summon whatever you want at any time, and they've got some movement stuff they can do.
And you have the whole I get to go first before you kind of thing. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to keep this lighthearted. But, yeah, there's an amazing amount of flexibility. And that jumps right into the competitiveness factor. They are the poster child for the elite, unbalanced army in the game. I even know a Slaanesh player that's won tournaments that will openly state that.
And honestly said they weren't going to play Slaanesh anymore because they felt like they weren't getting credit for their gameplay because the army's just so strong.
This is a player who has won GTs with other armies in the past.
Right.
And
So
ever
a
since he's been
good
playing
player.
Slaanesh, top-notch player.
Yes.
Ever since he's been playing Slaanesh and winning GTs, people who don't know who he was from the past are just saying, "Oh, you're playing Slaanesh." And for him, that takes away the win. So that can be how good they can be. Here's the caveat to that, though. It takes a great player to get them to that level. There's like algorithms and bookkeeping and math work they have to do.
There is a lot
and they have to plan everything.
Yes.
It takes a smart player who's a great player. But if the
very analytical player. I think you can be a good player who works on the fly, but I don't think that's what this is. This is somebody who's a planner, who's mathematically going to calculate things.
But still on the fly gives you a lot of options.
It does.
But if you take that player and you mix him with this army, there's an argument it's darn near unbeatable. And that's where I think it's unbalanced. Now, how does that come for new players? My worry about putting new players with an army that has a rep like Slaanesh is that if you come in and everyone is going to be like, "Oh, you're bringing that army, and you're new," I just am worried you might have a bad experience, that you're playing an army that everybody thinks should just dominate and win, and you're not early on.
Or because I played against somebody who it was kind of not their first time with that army on the table, but they obviously hadn't played them very much, and they did really well. But I don't think that they learned how to play the game. It's just they had all of these amazing tools. I don't think they were necessarily even learning how to play AOS.
And it's kind of like your first car being a Lamborghini, and then you have to, a rental Lamborghini, and then you got to go, drive an Accord.
Yeah,
and
so
you're like,
either way.
I mean, so you play them, you're winning, and then you decide to try something different, and you play that, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
Or GW comes out with new points or a new book, or FAQ, or new changes, and makes it they're not so unbalanced anymore. A new player getting this, and then if there are changes by GW, trying to jump to another army or this with changes, I just don't think that's a good place to start.
So not a recommended for us.
Not a recommended from us.
Doesn't mean don't do it.
Doesn't mean don't do it.
We're not recommended.
And other people have their own opinions.
Skaven.
Now that we're done with the 4 Chaos Gods, we go to the rest of Chaos. And who?
Skaven time! I actually don't even want to play them, but I am loving painting them.
When we did our video that's the overview of our armies, our Skaven, they weren't painted. And they're not all painted, but they're getting very close. And Tracy's just done an amazing job with these models, and she's having such fun painting.
These are the coolest models. Like I said, I don't even want to play them, but I think that I can't wait to see them on the table. I think they are amazing models. GW, I applaud you. You did amazing.
Get with that. The painting, you're still finding it fun, but very accessible.
Yeah, all of the clan rats and the plague monks, all of those kinds of things, you can whip those out really pretty quick with the contrast. I found an amazing video online for doing the Vermin Lord. He does a great job. He pushed me as a painter, and I feel like I really grew through that video on painting him. They're intricate enough, but they are simple enough. I don't know if that really makes sense, but...
Yeah, they're intricate enough to have excitement about them, but they're not complex enough that they're difficult to paint.
Right. Yes, and they allow for a little bit of messiness, I guess. And not everything has to be an exact line because they're dirty. They're rats.
So you throw some Agrax over a scene, and it gets some Agrax in there, and it's dirt, and it looks good.
Yeah.
So it is a good place to start painting-wise.
Very good place to start painting.
Costs to buy. Here's the problem. Very similar if you watch the first video about Stormcast. It is a very large battletome.
Yes.
And
lots of unit choices.
You need to do some research. on what you want to start with, or you could end up buying a lot of models that will never work together, and they'll never be on the tabletop.
Right. It is the one, I won't say the only, but one of the few battle tomes where certain models can only be played in certain situations. So you might love this model and love this model, but they can't even be played together.
I would say rules-wise, they can always be played together in that.
I get you.
I'm saying realistic strategy-wise, you're not going to put some models together.
Probably
Anybody
not.
reading that, you can take anything in the battle tome and put it on the tabletop.
I get you.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to play well.
Yeah.
It is one of the battle tomes, that and Legions Nagash, that really is like 4 separate battle tomes put into one. It really could have. They could have made the choice to make different battle tomes. And at one time, Can't Clan Pestilence was its own battle tome, and they threw it into this.
Right.
So you have to do some research about how you want to invest. If you know, though, it's actually not that expensive of an army to get into to have a really good army.
Yes.
So cost-wise, with some research, good place to start.
It is a great place to start.
Travel, you have a couple bigs, but all the clan rats and everything are easy as can be to travel.
Right.
So I think it's a very accessible army to get into to move around.
Move around, yes. So the only thing is, didn't you have a hard time finding some of these models?
Yes. Some of the models with this that are very popular, let's say Jezzail's, Warp Fire Throwers, some of those, they were very hard to find. They are coming on GW's site now.
Oh, good.
So you can start to get them on the site. But just like Seraphim for a while, many of the models were very difficult to find, but they are making options and they're putting them on the website now.
Oh, good.
But it was one of the ones that there for a while it was very difficult to find. Scryer Acolytes, which is a very popular unit to put in, I still have to look up to see. I don't know whether they're on the website or not. But so it is something that some of the units that you might want to find are out of print, because this is almost like a Cities of Sigmar also. They took all the old Skaven models and threw them into one book. But more of those are coming online at GW's shop now. Gameplay. Speed.
Playstyle. They're fast.
Nothing's fast.
Yeah.
They're fast as can be.
Yeah, they are.
They just can, total theme-wise, they can skitter all over across the place. Magic. There's a lot of good supportive spellcasting.
I think so, too.
Good supportive spellcasting. I wouldn't buy them for the magic, but you'd be hard-pressed to find too many builds that don't have some magic helping out in it.
Right. Yeah.
So
average.
It's an average magic. Shooting depends upon your build.
Right.
You can have a build that your shooting phase is okay. Shooting phase, I'm over. To a build that your shooting phase dominates your entire play style. Jezzail's, I've said it a couple times in this video, are almost a long strike crossbow from the fact of a unit of them can make any opponent adjust their playstyle. You can end up with your battle line being Storm Fiends with pretty good shooting if you go with Clan Scryer. So you can make shooting builds.
Yes. I'm going to bring up with shooting just because it's my thing, okay? And that is that as a fantasy player, guns, not my thing, but this army has a lot of guns. So if you like that, this is a great army for you in terms of the shooty phase.
Some of their other shooty, though, are things like catapults and things like that.
It does
fit
have
into the
some
fantasy
others,
a little bit better. You could, you could go with the Plague Claw with a Nurgle. So you can add that in. So it definitely has a shooting element to it.
Yes.
And it can be a very strong.
Yes.
It can be like a dominant shooting force. Killing, there's multiple ways to really do a lot of killing with this army. From having 40 plague monks hit you and do a lot of killing, to having a thing of Jezzail's taking out big guys, to having
to just outnumbering you
and rolling dice. Yeah, it can be very killing.
Yeah,
you can be very killing. But tankiness,
not as much.
Probably one of the largest weakness. I guess there are some ways that you can make them durable. But yeah, be prepared to...
Okay, so it's one of the few armies that can blow itself up. Right?
That is true.
So even if you take something that's tanky, and maybe you can't kill me, but I can just explode myself on accident.
And flexibility, there are some builds that allow you to do a lot of different things across the board.
There are. This is one of those great armies that give you a lot of different, very viable builds.
There's so many tools in the toolbox that, let's go on with that. That is both a good and a bad for new players.
True.
Okay? Here's the good for new players about that. One, you're going to allow it to expand and grow with Skaven, and if you want to commit to one army and be able to end up having 2 or 3 different army builds within one army so you don't get bored, but things interact with each other, this is a great place to start.
Yes.
When we do destruction, very similar to Gloomspite.
Absolutely.
And all the different
Very
ways
close.
you can do that book. The difference between those two is this is also stronger than that book a lot of times when it comes to competitiveness.
Oh, I agree.
Skaven can, I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but this can also be a strong army that way. But here's the big thing is, this army is fun.
Oh my gosh. It's a doom wheel.
The doom wheel.
You get a little mouse and a wheel going around the board.
Which, no, nobody takes that really for competitive games, but who cares? Play it because it's fun, and if you roll something wrong, your enemy, your opponent gets to move it for you. It's just, I love them, and I can't wait to play them. And I do think that if you start with them, Skaven players have like this rep. They show up at a game, I'm a Skaven player, and people are like, I love Skaven.
I know.
And it's a great place to start. I really do think it is. If you want to just win tournaments, heck, there's a focus you can do on some builds that you could put yourself in the running. I'm not going to say it's super elite, but there's some players doing very good with them.
Yes.
But that's not the reason to get in.
That's not why you start with
be.
Skaven, yeah.
It's flexible, it's fun, it's versatile.
And it can be competitive.
And it can be. But even if you don't, who cares? You're pushing around a bunch of rats and it's fun. So overall, I highly recommend Skaven.
I do too. I think Skaven would be a great starter army under the understanding that you need to kind of focus
Yes.
on what you're going to buy when you're starting. But understanding that you can expand quite a bit into a lot of different variety.
There are. When you bring up some of the units that if you want to go like Slaanesh and have Night Runners and a lot of those things, there are some of those models that are still tough to find. They're mainly going to be found in old metals on eBay and very expensive. But the core of what you need, you're going to be able to find.
Yeah.
So Skaven, big thumbs up.
I say, yeah, absolutely.
Beasts of Chaos. This is going to be very quick. We can't go into all the different gameplay and everything else.
Play styles, any of that
style.
stuff.
We don't really have a lot of experience. I've played against it a couple times. We can talk real fast about painting. I have painted Beastmen in the past. Mordheim, big Mordheim player. Easy to paint. If you can paint Skaven, they're very similar to that. We don't have a lot of advice to give you on that.
No, sorry.
What I will say for a new player is that I've played Beasts several times in tournaments.
Against them.
And it's not been pretty. I've just kind of walked right over them, even with Khorne. I went 2-3-1, and one of them was Beast Chaos and just wiped him right off the table. So a build that I didn't even think was a strong Khorne build, I beat him. I am hearing there are some Beast of Chaos builds for experienced players who know how to supplement them with units from other books that can turn them into very competitive. That's not for new players.
Yeah, for new players, I think they're not something you see very often. We have traveled quite a bit, and very rarely do we see somebody playing Beasts of Chaos. So it's something that if that's really what you want to do, go for it. I just, don't really have much to recommend.
If you're new to AOS and you played Mordheim or something like that, and you just love that lore and image and everything else, maybe give it a shot. But if you're brand new to the Warhammer world, and you're just getting into AOS, I would not recommend Beast Chaos.
Yeah, they're not well supported in terms of information. They're not something that's talked about a lot. They're not something you're going to see on a lot of social media feeds or information about them. So you're kind of on your own.
Okay. Slaves to Darkness. We bought the book, bought the cards. I love Archeon.
We really honestly did.
I love Archeon.
Have intentions of getting into it.
I did. Just not a fan. So couldn't excite me to really, or anybody else in the house, to get into it. I can't recommend this for new players. I think that's very similar to if you watched episode number 1 in this series about cities. This is a book designed for people that have followed slaves for years. know the units, have the models, really working to see how those things work together. Because if you don't do that, it's a mismatch.
It's not a very straightforward or easily compiled army. Now, they do have some really cool models.
Archaon, I want him.
Yeah.
I want to paint him. I want to play him on the battletop. I don't know who I'm going to play him with. Because he's so expensive, he points-wise, he can't actually fit into any of my other Chaos armies that well. So I don't really know what I would do with him, and that's the reason we bought the book of the War Scroll cards. I was thinking of an Archaon build. It takes a really good player to figure out how to make this work, how to make it work well. And if you're brand new to Warhammer, I can't recommend this as the place to start. But if the looks, they have a very stylized look, attract you, there is a lot there. I think you really have to love something about this look and this imagery to want to jump into it.
I agree.
Those are the 7 Chaos armies. We had a big thumbs up at least one of them.
Yes, I think Skaven Tide for a new person, we both recommend it.
We had some all right thumbs up. Some okay for Nurgle and Khorne.
Yeah.
And potentially I'm even saying Tzeentch. And some unknown for Beasts of Chaos and Slaves. But for the unknown is, I don't know if that's where I'd start. I'm just moving on. I'm not even going to mention. But
and a caution on Slaanesh.
I'm not bitter at all. But no, and I've really never lost a big game to him. So hopefully that helps out. We'll be recording soon, the Destruction and Death. Those will be shorter videos. There's much less battle tomes in each of those.
Fewer, yes.
And once again, we hope this helps.
Yeah, if you have any questions, comments, if you agree or disagree, either way.
Absolutely. And I am going to put that out that if you are watching this and you do like this, I think this is the first time I've said it in any of our videos, we would appreciate a like and a subscribe. It does make a difference. We're not monetizing, so it's not about money. But it does make a difference for us in the motivation to continue doing it, to be honest. That's honestly. It. We didn't get as many video views for the first video as we do for battle reports. I think we got more than we thought, but we did get a lot of likes.
Yes.
And that made us seem people were enjoying the video and made us want to come and do it again. I'm Steve.
And I'm Tracy.
And we are the Partners at War. And
keep playing.
Got it this time.
Spell it.
Tzeentch?
Tzeentch. It's like a sneeze. Tzeentch.